last 9 months, CTI's Youth Services team has been working very closely with Middlesex Community College as well as UMass Lowell to identify housing insecure students. So part of that is really working on obviously identifying them, but then figuring out where they're at, what they need, and the services that can help integrate them into the community. So when it comes to housing, the three of us, so CTI as well as the college and university, receive funding to actually provide housing for 5 students, 5 full-time students. So 3 from UMass Lowell and 2 from Middlesex Community College to have housing year-round, which has been pretty amazing. And it's a pilot program, and we talked a little bit about it during our presentation. But the pilot program in itself is really just working. It's growing rapidly, and I'm assuming that it's going to be a non-pilot program and just a regularly functioning program soon, just because of the amazing response that we've received from the students as well as the faculty. So there's been a lot of effort and a lot of conversation around educational supports when it comes for housing and housing insecure students.
So this morning we're gathered at the UMass Lowell Inn and Conference Center for our 2nd annual Summit to End Youth Homelessness. And community teamwork along with partners, with the federal government, with the state funding and the city of Lowell are working hard to make sure that every young adult has a place to call home. Over 200 young adults experience homelessness each year, and probably more than that. That's the number we can actually count, but many young adults are struggling, and they're at the high schools around the area. They're at the university, at Middlesex Community College, and we're partnering with those institutions to make sure there are places for young adults to live as they continue their education. We know that if you're chronically homeless as a young adult, you're more likely to experience chronically homelessness as an older adult. And we want to make sure that pattern is interrupted, that young adults can thrive, can find the services they need, in working with all of our partners on mental health, substance abuse, all of the things that young adults might find they need in their life. We want to make sure that they're there for them. And for some, it's just family life that is too difficult, so they leave. And those young adults, if they're given the opportunity to have a safe place and to have the supports they need, they thrive. And they go on to school and they have careers. So that's really what we're here today, to hear the progress we've made over the past year in working in partnership, in receiving some state and federal funding and city funding to really make a dent in this problem. And just this year, we've worked with over 125 young adults to stabilize their housing and to allow them to move forward in a very positive way. So we really are looking at that. And then what are the next steps? We obviously have not ended this problem, and we need to really look at what else we're going to do and what are our next steps over the next few years. So I am very grateful. We have so many people here today. We have close to 200 folks who care about this issue and who are determined to make a change.
So hello and good morning. My name is Amanda Millardo, Director of Youth Services here at CTI. Sorry about that, I had to readjust. We are pleased you are all able to attend this event. I hope that by the end of the day, you will have a better understanding of not only our services, but also some of the struggles that our young people face every day. For those who were here last year, welcome back. How many of you actually were here last year? Could you just raise your hands? Wow. So there's a lot of new faces here too. So again, welcome back. Think of today as kind of a report back of all the great things that we've accomplished over the last 9 months. That being said, we have a very exciting morning planned. Before we get into that, I would like to introduce you to 2 members of our Lowell Youth Action Board, Nyla and Jami.
Thank you. As an active lab participant, we find that starting our meetings off with the ground rules always help us stay task-oriented and mindful of our peers and partners. These rules were developed by the youth community, and it's expected that we all adhere to the following expectations.
No judgment.
Everyone's experience and the ways they have survived are different and valid. We want to create a space where everyone is accepted without judgment and we can respectfully engage with each other. Respect. In these meetings, we respect each other by listening, not interrupting. One person speaks at a time, and being kind to one another. This means we'll also put away our phones and pay attention to one another. We know that it's possible, we might disagree, but we will remember that all feelings are valid regardless. Assume the best intentions. We are all here because we care about ending youth homelessness. If someone says something that lands wrong, try to assume they mean well. Speak from the eye. When speaking in the group, we will not generalize or speak to any experience beyond our own. Similar experience look differently to different people. No shame, no blame. We will not be ashamed for our situations or things we do or have done. Our goal is to be honest, open, authentic, and kind to one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Jami and Nyla. Now, please welcome CTI's Chief Executive Officer, Karen Frederick.
Thanks, Amanda. And don't we have a beautiful Monday to be gathered here? And as I was listening to the expectations, wouldn't all of us be better off if everyone followed those expectations, right? So this morning, it's really my pleasure to just kick us off, and I want to give you just a little bit of history about where we've come from to get here, and then I'll introduce our guest speakers for the morning. So, anybody from DCF here this morning? I know they have a table outside. DCF friends over here. So, quite a few years ago, at the Department of Children and Families, they were struggling with youth aging out from foster care and developed really the only program of its kind in Massachusetts and probably in the country. We haven't found any quite like it, where they partnered with the Sisters of Charity of Ottawa at Barchant Hall and helped young women find homes and stability and mentors with the sisters. And that was a project that the Department of Children and Families Citizens Advisory Board worked on. There was some of community teamwork staff. There was staff from many of the nonprofits who helped DCF in making that happen. And DCF ran with it. And then they created, with Caleb Foundation, a place for young men aging out of foster care. But what we knew in the community is that there were many, many young adults experiencing homelessness who were not DCF involved. And there were more young adults aging out of foster care that could be accommodated. So what some people don't know about community teamwork is part of our mandate from the federal government is to help the community solve problems. And we get a little tiny bit of flexible money to do that. So when we do our needs assessment or when people are in the community talking to us and they keep bringing to us a problem, it's not enough to just say, gee, yeah, that is a problem. Somebody should do something about that. Our job is to help convene the community to tackle and solve a problem and to make the conditions in our communities better. So with young people experiencing homelessness, we kept hearing this. And it really was two business people who spurred us on with their passion for this, and that was Sandy Wilson, who's now retired, but was a vice president at Enterprise Bank, and Louis Pedroso, who's a businessman, executive business owner, who said, if you aren't going to help us do this, who is? And truly that started our work in the community. And I want to thank our Chief Program Officer, Michael Collins, who really took this ball and ran with it. And then threw it at Carl Howell to continue the work, who's our Division Director for Housing and Homelessness. So we convened the community several years ago. We've been doing this work, and I am so excited to hear about this today. And I hear about it every day, so I know what you're going to hear about the progress. We have a talented group of people who are leading this, with Amanda Millardo, who you just met, Nicholas DiGiamano, did I say that right? Close. Brittany Hill, Brett Duran, who are working with partners. And the other hallmark of this is we don't have to do everything at community teamwork, but what we do have to do is work in partnership. And this community is so very good at that. So all of the agencies sitting here today that are outside around with tables are partners in this work. And every day there's a new partner. I was talking to Amy Pessia this morning, who's helping us bring food to our Youth Opportunity Center and to Youth Build. And that's really the work we do together. And I am so very proud of that, and I'm proud to be in this community where that's how we do our work. And also to have young adult voices in the room. Will all the young adults put their hands up today? We welcome you, and we are so glad you are here. And thank you so much for helping us do this work. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our mayor, to welcome us this morning, and to give some remarks about young adults experiencing homelessness. And I have to say, we couldn't have a better mayor at this point in time for this work, because he has years of experience working with young adults as the retired head of school at Lowell High School, now city councilor, was elected mayor. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Bill Samaras. You want me to? Yeah. Okay, all right, I'll be back.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everybody. It's so great to be here. The problem of youth homelessness. I was preparing some remarks last night, and I sort of went off on a different tangent, so allow me to say what I have to say, and I think you'll understand what I'm getting at. So, really, on behalf of the City of Lowell, Councilor now, Senator Kennedy, and myself, I want to welcome you to this summit. The summit's to end homelessness. I do not have to tell anyone here that homelessness is a problem. You cannot be in education today or work at community teamwork without understanding that homelessness is a problem. Not with just families or individuals. That's how we thought at one time, who are on drugs or some type of problem or any other issue, but high school students, college students, and you know that. So we're here to talk about ending homelessness. It's easier said than done, because there is no simple answer, and it will require the will of everyone to deal with this problem. But first, I want to applaud and support the progress that you have made in the area to support our youth, high school and college. I'm pleased that Lowell and the community teamwork was selected to provide housing support to our students at Middlesex Community College and the University of Lowell. And what I'm personally pleased with is that you are providing services to our high school students. I know that is needed. I could tell you many stories that I found. And I appreciate the fact that community teamwork is also opening up a new youth opportunity center. However, as well as you are doing, as we are doing, I want you to understand that I'm cautiously optimistic about how we do this, because we know what the problem is. We must have well-supported programs, funding, housing, meet the social needs of the students to resolve this issue. Why do I say this? I want to tell you a little story, and but it does tie in with this. A long time ago, I was the part-time director of adult basic education. I remember we had worked at the state level, and we planned a conference. And the conference was to eliminate the need for adult education. The plan was to put ourselves out of business by working to make the K-12 education so well structured that no child would be a dropout of the K-12 program. This was well before bilingual education, special ed reform. What we found, it was a far bigger problem than there were no simple answers. And what was most important to me, not the will really to deal with it. With the issues that needed to be addressed. Homelessness was an issue then, and this, we're talking a long time ago. Health issues were a problem. You know where I'm going with this? To make significant change, you have to have the will to support and make that change at all levels. I'm not saying you cannot do it, or we cannot do it, because sometimes, too often, we come up and speak and we say, you cannot do it. It's we. It has to be the we. Homelessness of our youth can be eradicated. You must continue what you're doing here today, and you're doing so well. But you also must convince the political powers. That's what I've come to learn in my late life political career. You must convince the political powers that they too are responsible for making it happen. You have your hands full, because as being part of the political circle, you'll hear, well, we want to help you, but the tax rate, we can't move the tax rate. We can't do this, we can't do that. Don't accept we can't do. What you must plan to do this, to handle this situation, is say, what can we do? And when you have a situation where we all talk about what we can do, what you are trying to do here, what needs to be done here, what has been happening, will be better met, and we will eradicate homelessness of our youth and actually everyone else. But it's so important, because if our youth do not stay part of the working structure and obtain their education, we're lost, because you would be losing wonderful minds of people who could make changes. That's what I learned at Lowell High School. I learned certainly that students that were homeless or had those type of issues, yes, they had some discipline issues. What were the discipline issues? They couldn't make it to school. They weren't fresh, they weren't bad, they just couldn't be in school, so it was considered a problem. They were considered the problem. They are not the problem. We are not the problem if we don't eradicate it and if we don't deal with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And led by our Youth Action Board voices, we will continue to have the next generation of those voices to talk to our legislators and councilors and all of our elected officials to help make sure that these issues in this community are paid attention to. So that's the work for all of you, and that's our challenge to you, to keep using your voices and lead us in this work. So next, it is my pleasure to introduce our new state senator from the 1st Middlesex District. Senator Kennedy is a former councilor, former mayor, another passionate voice for young adults experiencing homelessness, who helped initiate the first inaugural fundraiser, rock and roll fundraiser, to end youth homelessness. We are so grateful for that. Mayor Samaras continued it. In addition to all of his other work, he cares passionately about this issue, and it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Edward Kennedy.
Thank you very much. I don't know about you, but I think in terms of weather, this was probably the best weekend of the summer. I know I had a lot of events to attend on Sunday, and then yesterday there weren't as many events, but the Red Sox won, the Patriots won, so it was still a good day. And it seems like at least the weather is continuing into today. Anyways, I just wanted to say good morning and thank you for inviting me to be here today and holding this important summit as we work together to combat the complex issues surrounding youth homelessness. As a city councilor, I have been proud of the city's commitment to take on these difficult problems and seek solutions with our partners in the nonprofit, social service, and education sectors. In 2017, when I was serving as mayor, I formed a committee to launch the Mayor's Holiday Fest for Homeless Youth, a rock and roll fundraiser that in its first year raised $11,000. Mayor Samaras continued the event and stepped up to the challenge of besting our inaugural fundraising amount, raising $18,000 last year. And I'm sure that this year will be even better. And the pressure is on Mayor Samaras. Community Teamwork has been able to use those funds to develop a flexible funding pool used to provide emergency housing, rental assistance, transportation, and support to help young people continue their education and career development. Dozens of unaccompanied youth in Lowell find themselves homeless and on the verge of homelessness each year. They are a vulnerable group with no family support and nowhere to turn. However, through interventions like the programs and support offered by CTI, many of these resilient young people can turn their lives around and be successful. In my role as a state senator, I was happy to support the $1.7 million increase in this year's state budget for the Executive Office of Health and Human Services to support this vital work, and hope to increase this amount in next year's budget. Thank you to CTI's Youth Services team for the commendable job you do supporting our youth and young adults. Every day you are creating a better future, not only for the people you serve directly, but for all of us, and for the city of Lowell as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your endless support. To keep you all on your toes, we've incorporated a few trivia questions this morning around youth homelessness. So this is an online trivia game, so there are some instructions that come with it. So as an interactive activity, this requires you to have access to your phones. So if you guys could take your phones out, that would be great. This is one time you can do it. There's also instructions on your table too, just in case you miss any of it. So, in order to play along, please take your phones out and open up a new text message. With no spaces, in the to field, type the number 855-910-9662. In the message space, type @ the little A with the circle around it, Youth Summit 19, and hit send. If you guys have any questions or if there's an issue with it, just raise your hand and someone will be over to help. I was waiting for everyone's hands to go up, thank goodness. Okay, I'll give you a couple minutes. When you hit send, don't expect a response. It's not that friendly. All right, so if you notice in the bottom of the screen, there's actually a little tally. I think it's at 80 now, and so that tells you how many people are actually part of this program, or this activity. So, now, let's take this for a test run. I'm gonna hit the next slide, and that's the question. So, what is the name of my cat? Right, I know. What is the name of Amanda's cat? You type in 1, 2, or 3, or 4 for the corresponding answer. So it looks like, oh, Godzilla's in the lead right now. And so as you can see, it's a big cat. I know, it's true. So as you can see, the numbers will go up and down as people put their votes in. You have about, oh, time's up. So the answer to that question is Olivia. Sorry. That's my cat's name. I know. Everyone would tell me that's the most boring name out of the group, but I thought it sounded nice. So, does everybody kind of understand how this game is played? So we're going to have a series of these questions scattered throughout the presentation this morning, so make sure you guys have your phones out and ready. All right, where am I? Okay. You can switch the slide now, Sam, thank you. Okay. So this section, we will talk to you about our findings from our work over the last year. Youth Services Programming works with young adults between the ages of 16 and 24. These folks can be homeless, but also at risk of homelessness. Our goal is to prevent and minimize the time a young person experiences homelessness. We aim to provide the lightest touch necessary towards stabilization. So keeping that in mind, our work expands to include homelessness prevention supports to access education, employment, and community connections working towards stability. Now, with that being said, we're going to move on to our first official WooClap question. How many youth and young adults has CTI's Youth Services Programming seen over the last calendar year? Again, you're going to count, you're going to type in the number, so 1, 2, 3, 4 for your corresponding answer. Right? One second left. All right. The correct answer is 124 youth and young adults. So well done to all of those who got that correct. I know most of you already probably knew that information. But either way, our youth come to us in a variety of different ways. Some are referred through our resource center downstairs at CTI. Some are referred through our community partners. And others just hear about our services and show up at our doors. Our priority for our youth who walk through our door is to build trust and rapport. Majority of the youth have had poor experiences with service providers, and we intend to try and change that perspective. We meet these young adults where they're at and remain youth-centered to help them achieve their goals. They are welcomed at any point by myself and my staff to connect, to plan, or even just to have a snack and hang out for a little while. In your packets, so those folders that you guys received this morning, there's a terminology sheet that includes the definitions of homelessness according to the federal guidelines. I just wanted to break those down for you all. So it's broken up into 4 categories. Category 1 is literally homeless, which is meaning that people are staying in a place not meant for human habitation or an emergency shelter. Category 2 is imminent risk of homelessness, which means that they will lose their primary nighttime residence within a certain period of time and have no other resources or support networks to obtain housing. Category 3 is unaccompanied youth under the age of 25 who do not meet any of the other categories but are homeless under other federal definitions. That's generally the term that we use associated with couch surfing, so for young adults who are bouncing from place to place. Category 4 is fleeing domestic violence. Individuals or families who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, which includes both physical and emotional abuse. Thank you. Out of the 124 young adults, 42 participants fall under Category 1, which is identified as being literally homeless. The locations that have been reported that young people are staying include cars, both their own, friends, family members, park benches, emergency shelters, and unmonitored hallways or abandoned buildings. Upon intake, 52% of our young adults report struggling with mental health. 52%. Youth Services focuses on behaviors associated with mental health concerns as opposed to simply having a diagnosis. Although we don't do any clinical work, we recognize that mental health concerns are important to recognize, but they also provide a baseline for service planning and connection to community partners if needed.
last 9 months, CTI's Youth Services team has been working very closely with Middlesex Community College as well as UMass Lowell to identify housing insecure students. So part of that is really working on obviously identifying them, but then figuring out where they're at, what they need, and the services that can help integrate them into the community. So when it comes to housing, the three of us, so CTI as well as the college and university, receive funding to actually provide housing for 5 students, 5 full-time students. So 3 from UMass Lowell and 2 from Middlesex Community College to have housing year-round, which has been pretty amazing. And it's a pilot program, and we talked a little bit about it during our presentation. But the pilot program in itself is really just working. It's growing rapidly, and I'm assuming that it's going to be a non-pilot program and just a regularly functioning program soon, just because of the amazing response that we've received from the students as well as the faculty. So there's been a lot of effort and a lot of conversation around educational supports when it comes for housing and housing insecure students.
I would now like to introduce our panel of young adults who are going to talk to us about their education and their housing stability. Would you please welcome up Nyla, Jafar, Nessa, Gideon, and Lynn. And I would also like to introduce our MC, Saul.
Thank you, Nick. So how this works basically is I'm about to read a couple questions to these guys, and I'm about I want them to pass the microphone around and answer the question that you can. You don't have to answer anything that you don't feel comfortable answering. So without further ado, I'm gonna ask these questions. Okay, so one of the first questions is, what is a good way to raise awareness in the schools about services and help out there for the youth experiencing homelessness?
Answer that question.
Well, I think a good way would be to talk to, teachers, adults, and people that look like they have their life together, because sometimes if you just keep your mouth closed, you really can't connect with others. And if you have an open mouth and you're able to talk to other people, they're more able to hear your needs and concerns and help you out.
I think it should be posted around the school and for some of the staff to mention it to homerooms and everything.
Yeah. If anything, I'll repeat the question. Sorry about that. Yeah. All right. What's a good way to raise awareness in schools about services and help out for their youth who are experiencing homelessness? Oh man. All right.
It's the same question. Does anybody else want to?
You guys just want to go to the next question? Anything? Yeah. All right. Let's get it. Okay. The next question is, what is some advice you might give to students who may be experiencing the same things you did?
Some advices that I would give to people who are going through this experience is being open and talking to others and getting information like CTI, maybe warfare, stuff like that, and keeping good communication and building a healthier relationship with people will, help them get to know you more. And I feel like, don't be afraid to, ask for help or talk to somebody that is up there and that who knows and who's been through this experience.
I would say don't give up. Don't burn your connections and make connections. That's what I would say.
All right. That's fine.
I
I know it's probably going to be really scary to tell somebody because it took me a while, but as long as you tell someone, like, have the courage, then you'll be okay. I think you should have like at least one trustful person, like in Lowell or something, to like get your voice out there if you can't do it yourself.
Honestly, just speak up. There's nothing to be scared about.
So I would think it's really hard time when you're transitioning of being homeless and also focus on your studies. It's the hardest time I ever faced in my entire life. And the advice I would really give, and I wish if everyone in my situation understand and consider, is to stay disciplined, stay focused, which is really hard to do if you don't have a place to start from. Base is the most important thing to start from. It's a place to study, it's a place to rest, it's a place to relax. And if you don't have those main things, you cannot really focus on your studies. So what I would really say, the main thing is your studying, your focus on getting good grades. For sure, my grades dropped a little bit down, but I got it up again. But it's that point when you realize your real abilities, and you cannot do that without those people help.
I have another thing to say. Hold on. Also, don't let your friends hold you back, because they might be going through the same thing, even though they don't want to say nothing. So yeah.
And I have something to add. Like what you guys said was beautiful. I think one advice I'd give to anybody that's going through this is that you're never alone. Like, that's the real life thing. You're never alone. There's actually people that go through stuff like this every day that people don't know about. So,
and there's also a lot of community support.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so hold on. So for the third question, I'm gonna ask you guys, what drove you to keep going?
Well, what drove me to keep going is I have a daughter, and before I had a baby, I didn't really care about myself because I didn't have the family support or anybody there for me. But now I have something to work for. And, you know, my kid is my number one priority, and I would do anything in the world for her, you know? So that's what keeps me going.
All you moms should get it.
What keeps me going is the fact that where I came from West Africa, Liberia, and there, when I was born, it was a war-torn country, and I got adopted. I was lucky, and the adoption really didn't work out, but I made it through DCF or whatever. I became independent, but just where I started from, like, I don't ever want to go back there. Like, I don't ever want to be put in a situation where I feel like I can't fend for myself, where I feel like I can't, like, succeed. And that just drives me to keep going. The fact that I don't want to see myself lower than who I am as an individual. And I know that I am something and I am someone.
What drove me to keep going is looking at the past, because every day it's something that you changed. And I don't know, you just overcome everything day by day. And if you look through the past, you can see that you grew as a person.
What drove me to keep going personally was being introduced to a better support system like CTI and becoming more aware that youth homelessness was a problem, and I wasn't the only one going through it myself. The downfalls and obstacles I faced was, screw that. I faced has brought me to where I need to be and guided me to stability and growth opportunities.
Honestly, what kept me going are two things. First, the spirit that God gave me to keep fighting, which are the challenges. You know, if your spirit is not challenged, you don't really push yourself to go. And that's the main thing. Secondly, and most importantly, if you see people like CTI teamwork are more concerned about your success than you are, then you have no excuse of failure at any time.
Okay, so for the fourth question, I want to ask, did anyone at your school know about your situation? And if they did, or if they didn't, what made you tell them or not?
Well, for me, nobody in school knew my situation because I didn't like it to be out there. And to remind you, like, some kids around my age, you know, could be spreading my situation to other people, and that's not what I need. So I went out and had community, like the community help me, you know, because I think that that's the best way to do it, instead of going to other people that are most likely not going to help you or can't even help you because they're busy working on themselves and they're still in school, you know. So that's what I think.
Well, in Lowell High School, my dean knew, and some of my counselors knew. Some of my counselors were there for me, and well, I didn't really seek help besides youth harbors, and that's where I found my first apartment by myself, or a room, whatever it's called. But yeah, not everybody knew, and I wasn't willing to tell everybody. I have really high self-esteem, so it would have lowered my self-esteem a lot. And I guess that's like not being humble or whatever, but I don't know. I couldn't bring myself to tell people. But once I did, or once they found out, they were there to help me. So thank you guys and everyone there in CTI.
When I was in Lowell High, none of the students knew because I was too scared to tell anybody. But I told some teachers, counselors, and principals. And I had two very close counselors that helped me with everything. And they were really special to me, those staff. But some of the staff wasn't so caring.
I'm sorry, what's that again? Yes, please.
The question was, did anyone at your school know your situation, and what made you tell them?
Sure. Actually, there's only one person in my school got to know about this. She's like a mother figure to me. She worked as a coordinator of the disability office. She's the one who I trust, and I told her I'm just going homeless. Even when I said that word, I was scared that someone hears it, someone else out of the room, because there's always stigma goes up with you. If you said you're homeless, there's other assumptions that comes with it. In fact, I grew up very well. I had good education. I'm an athlete, so all of that will be erased if I pronounce the word homeless. So only one person in my school got to know it, and everyone else just saw me coming with this suit, put in my coat on, and walking into school because I have other roles. I used to be student leader before graduating from Middlesex, and all of that. No one knows that the person who's in front of them is homeless because they will have other assumptions of me other than their tutor or their executive board officer or their colleague.
And I'd like to say something. I agree with what he said because that's exactly how I felt like telling people, because nobody knew about my situation until like my junior year, when I was basically like kicked out of the school and then forced to like let everybody know. So it's just kind of like, I do agree with what he was saying about the whole thing. All right, I got like 2 more questions. So, Okay. How did your housing situation impact your education?
Well, my housing situation impacted because I didn't have anywhere to relax, to study, or even, doing my homework because I was homeless, and, you can't really do much. And I just dropped out because it was my senior year. I was actually a high honor student. I was just really stressed, and at the time being, I was pregnant also, and that just literally.
My schooling, my homelessness affected my schooling tremendously because the only reason I kept getting in trouble was I didn't show up to school. And yeah, I had appointments to go to, but the only excusable absence was medical or a court situation. But when you're in DCF and you have to make your therapy sessions and a lot of other things, and you're looking for your next bed or your next meal, it's not really well to have that in your head and go to school at the same time. You can't sit there and study for a test and think, oh, where am I going to sleep tonight? At the same time, that just doesn't work out. You can't sit there and prepare for a project. Where am I going to do the project? Where am I going to get the supplies for the project? And so eventually it's everything just keeps piling up and piling up and piling up. And by everything, I mean obstacles. And eventually you just want to give up. But yeah, that's how it affected my schooling. Homelessness, I gave up. I just dropped out at senior year. I had literally 7 credits left, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't make the attendance or whatever they call. But yeah.
I agree with what they said. I used to be a high honor student since kindergarten through junior year. And junior year is when I became homeless. And I couldn't get to school because, like they said, we were worried about where we were going to sleep the next day, or where we were going to get our food from, or all those other things. And every time we did show up to school, the staff would just discipline you because you were late. And they would just make their own assumptions, oh, you didn't come to school because you wanted to skip or something. And every time we did come to school, you would always get in trouble for it. So why would I want to come to school if I'm always getting in trouble for the days that I can come? And it wasn't like I wanted to skip or nothing. It's just I couldn't get there, or I didn't have nowhere to sleep that night, so I didn't take a shower. And I didn't want to be smelly for school. But yeah.
What was the question? My homelessness affected my education because it's hard being unstable and figuring out where you're going to go or what you're going to do and trying to be in school. Where's your stuff going to go? Or sometimes you may think you trust somebody and your stuff ends up somewhere else or thrown out. So it's just hard to maintain, but yeah.
I think it did affect on me in various ways. Educationally, in one semester, actually from spring semester and until August or end of August, so there are 5 months. In 5 months, I transferred to new houses 6 times in 5 months, which really affected on me negatively because, as I mentioned earlier, and as my friend says here, if you don't have base to start from, you cannot go anywhere because the base is where you can concentrate all your effort, where you can start, as I mentioned earlier.
And sorry we're taking so long, guys. Okay. Okay. I got like 2 more questions. One of them is, what are your recommendations for educators, people in the education system, to better support students dealing with house instability? Can I answer my first? Okay. I feel like teachers should like one-on-one, like, talk to students and actually like figure out what's going on. Like, the reason I didn't say anything about my situation was because I told my counselor and she ended up telling everybody else that wasn't my counselor. So I was like, I didn't feel safe. So I just felt like betrayed, you know what I'm saying? Like, I had nobody to go to. I go to only person I think I can go to, and they just end up telling me, you know what I'm saying? So just like, I just feel like one-on-one, like, you know what I'm saying? Like a one-on-one meeting would be perfect so that it's teacher can understand.
I just want to say I totally agree with that, because I've told somebody in my school about my situation, and it started spreading, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. That's why I suggest community support better than, just going to school, because when I went to school and sometimes I would skip out, because every time I would think like, what am I going to do? And I can't focus, and I try like to stay half of the day, and then I just skip out and leave because of all the situation that I'm just going through.
I guess I would tell the educational providers and everything to just reach out. Like, if you see a kid that has perfect attendance and then just starts dropping like their attendance, like my friend over here, ask. Or if you see a non-behavioral kid start acting up, maybe it's not because they're just angry. Maybe it's because their lifestyle that they're living. Maybe it's because they don't have that breakfast in the morning. And yes, I know Lowell provides breakfast in the morning, but sometimes it's hard to make it like in I'm sorry. Sometimes it's hard to make it in time to get it. But yeah, reach out, and keep reaching out. Like, don't stop. That's what I would tell all my educational providers if I had their ears right now.
I think the educational providers should at first stop with the assumptions and actually talk to them instead of disciplining them, because you guys are just quick to discipline someone for being late, but why not ask, why are you late? And when they do tell you the reason, don't quick to say like, oh, you're lying, or this and that. Yeah.
Just be like, I get it.
Oh, okay, well, you better be here tomorrow, but you're in the same situation tomorrow.
My advice to educational providers or teachers and stuff is advertise it more, speak about it, interact with students more.
My wish is to educate professors or teachers on the high school level to have one-to-one relationship with students. So in my entire high school journey, I had one person that I trust, and in my associate degree journey, I had one person. That one person doesn't necessarily need to be your counselor or someone. It must be just someone who works there and someone you trust, someone you can tell other things, not only your grades, my guys are dropping down, no, someone who can kind of like say everything you want to say to, and that person has the sources. Other than that, I did experience some privacy issues in there. I think they need more privacy training and respect to the students' life. So that's why I want to say one person doesn't need the title of being counselor, more of a person who you can trust and respect.
After this question, I'm going to do the last one. What did you see as a safe place while being in school? Like, where did you see as a safe place while being in school?
Well, a safe place while I was in school was, her name is Miss Allentuck. She has like a room, she does meditation, and I felt like that was pretty relaxing, and you know, she helps me meditate and get things off my mind and relax me and calm me. I felt like that was pretty safe. The only safest spot in school.
I guess my safe spot, well, I had two safe spots, but my main safe spot was my counselor's room, and my second was the lunchroom, I guess, because, I don't know, there was always food there, and it was lunchtime. But yeah, those were my two favorite safe spots. I was able to talk to my counselor, and I was able to nourish my body. And people might like overlook that as, oh, that's whatever, but to me, it meant a lot. And like to be able to talk to my counselor helped me made it through the day sometimes, and to be able to eat also helped me made it through the day. So those are my two safe spots.
My safe spot was also my counselor's room, and it was also a youth harvest who helped me a lot. And I had this one teacher, but then she left the school year on my senior year, so I couldn't go to her anymore.
My safe spot was the principal's office. It does not in no discipline actions. I just connected to the principal more.
For me, for a long time, I did not find any until I found that person. She still works as a coordinator of the disability office, Gilaisma Persova. I still have connections with her. It's the same person who I mentioned earlier, where you have some mental connection with. That's the only person that I have felt like comfortable talking to, and she was the one who connected me with CTI.
I just want to tell you guys my safe spots. I have like three. One of my favorite safe spots was Katie's Closet. That's in Lowell High. If you guys have never been there, just because I love clothes. My other safe spot was Mrs. Haley's office, because every time I was in there, I knew I was safe. And my last safe spot was CTI, because Miss Haley helped me get into CTI. So I do appreciate her for that and everything, making sure that I didn't step into the path that I was in. She really did put me onto a better life.
And I just wanted to add on that Katie's Closet is one of the biggest help that there was for kids who were homeless and that was going through things and didn't really have anything. Katie's Closet helps with, clothes, shampoos, providing products and all that stuff. And I think that was a really good one. And actually, one of the news people came in to talk about how Katie's Closet has helped others. And I was one of those people who actually talked about it, and I think it's just a good thing in the school. Yeah.
All right, so I'm at the last question. So for all my brothers and sisters, this is the last question I have to ask you guys. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years, I see myself getting my daughter back, having a car, having a stable job, having a stable home, and that's it.
In 5 years, I see myself either getting my GED or my diploma, transferring to Middlesex Community College for 2 years, then to Westfield State, so I can join the Naval ROTC program and enter the Marines.
In 5 years, I see myself graduating from Middlesex Community College and also licensed as a nail tech. And I also see myself being very independent. And that's it.
In 5 years, I see myself as an LPN or RN with my apartment and my car.
Actually, I have a lot of goals that I'm working towards. In 5 years, I will be finishing up my master's and starting my doctorate degree in criminal psychology. I'll be.
That's fire.
Then opening my own martial arts school. That's one of my dreams to achieve, and also learning habla español.
And as for my goal, I see myself in 5 years, which I'm already working on it now. I see myself being a multi-million-dollar businessman. I'm already working on my own clothing brand right now, so it is what it is. Yeah, we're done.
Thank you all for your thoughtful responses. You guys did great. Can we give them a round of applause? You can go back to your seats.
Over the past 9 months, CTI's Youth Services team has been working very closely with Middlesex Community College as well as UMass Lowell to identify housing insecure students. So part of that is really working on obviously identifying them, but then figuring out where they're at, what they need, and the services that can help integrate them into the community. So when it comes to housing, the three of us, so CTI as well as the college and university, receive funding to actually provide housing for 5 students, 5 full-time students. So 3 from UMass Lowell and 2 from Middlesex Community College to have housing year-round, which has been pretty amazing. And it's a pilot program, and we talked a little bit about it during our presentation. But the pilot program in itself is really just working. It's growing rapidly, and I'm assuming that it's going to be a non-pilot program and just a regularly functioning program soon, just because of the amazing response that we've received from the students as well as the faculty. So there's been a lot of effort and a lot of conversation around educational supports when it comes for housing and housing insecure students.
I'm Carl Howell. I'm the Division Director of Housing and Homeless Services for Community Teamwork, and I'd like to thank you for coming here this morning. I want to talk to you a little bit about our youth services and the programming that we've been offering, but I also want to kind of reflect back to where we were 15 months ago. Most of you here in this room today were here on June 18th, 2018, where we had our first youth summit. At that point in time, we had no staff, no programming, and no funding. Now today, we have 4 staff, 5 programs, and we're looking to hire 2 additional staff, a case manager and a clinical coordinator. At this time, I would like to introduce our youth service staff. You've seen some of them already during this thing, but I would like them to the summit, sorry, not thing. But I would like for them to stand when I say their name. Amanda Millardo, our Director of Youth Services. Nicholas DiGiamo, our Housing Case Manager. Brett Dorian, our Intake Case Manager. And Brittany Melton Hill, our outreach service provider, is not here today. Hey, Sam, next slide. Thank you, sir. So this is our staff that we currently have. In this photo, it was taken this year, the 2019 youth count. The staff, with the help of some youth advisors or ambassadors, canvassed the city of Lowell and surrounding towns to identify youth and young adults to complete a state survey around housing and their housing status. Also, you can see that we have a Lowell celebrity in this picture. Whoa. This is Chester the Motor Dog, and he was happy to join the team and be a part of making new friends in the initiative. I cannot begin to tell you how hard this team has worked over the last 9 months. They've developed new programming, they've implemented services for the city of Lowell and surrounding communities. Everything that you'll hear next started with nothing. And now we are supporting over 124 youth in just the last 9 months alone, not even in the calendar year. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is our Youth Opportunity Center. We'll be opening our doors hopefully in November. Currently it's under renovations, but this is going to be our hub for all youth services under the CTI banner. This is located at 167 Dutton Street in the downtown Lowell area, and again, will be a one-stop shop for young adults who are in need of crisis intervention, supportive services, and basic living needs. Thank you. This center will house programs like our Youth Build program that provides vocational and educational components to young adults between 16 and 24 years old. We have Youth Build in the house today over in the far corner. These men and women work really hard to learn vocational skills under our carpentry and construction vocational skill set, as well as our culinary arts and hospitality. Our other programs will be our outreach services, where we're engaging with the community that is Lowell, that is a greater Lowell, as well as also engaging in 30 other communities in the Middlesex and Essex County. We will also be offering transitional and rapid rehousing case management services. Sam, can you go back? Please, thank you. Thank you. We'll be offering transitional housing and rapid rehousing case management services out of the Youth Opportunity Center. And lastly, we will also be opening our Milieu Day programming in November. This will be a place where we provide, as I said earlier, some intake assessment skill sets, as well as just some supportive services and a safe place for youth to come and receive support. The Youth Opportunity Center would not be possible without the support of all of you in this room, but also the support of key stakeholders in the community, like the Smith Family Foundation, the Parker Foundation, EOHHS, which is the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, as well as the Lowell Foundation and HUD. With them at the table, we've been aligned with some funding and also their support in the direction of the Youth Opportunity Center to make it all possible and do the renovations, as well as bring on staff that can provide these supportive services for the youth in our community. Is that telling me to get off the stage? What's that? Just to highlight a little bit more of our funding streams, EOHHS has provided us with $325,000 in supportive services. That is for directly linked to outreach services in our milieu programming. That also helps fund our intake case managers, our clinical case managers, and our overall operations. The EOHHS funds also are really focused on 36 communities in the Middlesex and Essex County, where we're engaging with those counties, we're engaging with the youth in those cities and towns to really connect them to resources in their area, as well as Lowell. We've also received funding from the City of Lowell under the Continuum of Care that's directly funded by the HUD. This is to provide our transitional housing and our rapid rehousing programming, where we meet youth where they're at and we try to rehouse them as quickly as possible. And in situations where they cannot be rehoused quickly, we can offer them transitional housing to really reduce barriers to get them housed long-term and permanent. Now I'd like to bring up to the podium is Brett Doran, our intake case manager, to speak more about the milieu and our outreach programming.
Thanks, Carl. Okay, so I'm going to talk with you about our street outreach programming. Youth Street Outreach works with the city and community partners such as the Lowell Co-op, the Lowell General, and Lowell Transitional Living Center, and other providing agencies to identify youth in shelter or youth staying in places not meant for human habitation. Our focus is to build rapport and engage youth in services that support positive youth development. Outreach focuses on relationships and trust. We practice harm reduction techniques and utilize motivational interviewing to help support our most vulnerable population and provide a warm hand to help connect them to youth-specific supportive services. Viewed as an extension of outreach services, we are very excited to announce the opening of our Milieu Center. This is located within the Youth Opportunity Center at 167 Dutton Street. This space is entirely youth-centric and aimed to support youth and young adults who otherwise would not have access to basic needs, including showers, laundry, and community supports. This space will be inclusive, trauma-informed, and above all, a safe place to access resources. Our mission is to dismantle barriers for these young folks and to help them get on the road to individual success and independence. The photos above indicate where we started from and where we are today. CTI is proud to say that the Milieu program is scheduled to open its doors later this fall. I now welcome Nick, Youth Services Housing Case Manager, to speak about the housing programming.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you everyone for being here today. I want to take some time to talk about some of the programming that we've had in place since our programming started last October. In the past year, dozens of young adults have been accessing housing services through our college engagement program, our rapid rehousing program, transitional housing, and homeless prevention services. The College Engagement Program is a pilot program that is a collaboration between colleges and universities across the Commonwealth, as well as local agencies like CTI. In this partnership, full-time students access housing services and room and board coordinated through DHE and EOHHS funding. These are students who would have nowhere else to go during breaks and holidays, but also throughout the school year. Working with UMass Lowell and Middlesex Community College, Youth Services is tasked with providing case management to identify needs while in school, but also, more importantly, in their transition through life after school. Our work consists of youth-led service planning, concentrating on maintaining academic excellence and exposure to life skills that will carry them well beyond the classroom. As providers, we aim to increase education around services not only for students enrolled in this program, but also others who are in need. With the ongoing success that this program has seen and the promise of sustained positive outcomes, the Commonwealth, along with our services, ensured that support and resources will continue, and with it, the ability to reach more students who are in need of this housing. For each of our youth that walk through our door, our focus is to get them housed quickly and independently. Through rapid rehousing, we have supported 14 youth and young adults to transition to their first apartments and maintain their tenancy. As a case manager, my role is to support our youth in seeking out and maintaining apartments, provide education about independent living, and support them to sign their own lease. We participate in housing visits and promote stabilization through employment, education, and above all, self-care. Our sessions review progress of youth-driven service plans, working on increasing income, budgeting, and ensuring long-term stabilization. Youth and young adults are better able to access community resources for substance use, childcare, and community engagement. Increasing the efficiency of this program to ensure that folks obtain housing faster and for longer has and continues to be our top priority. For folks who aren't financially independent for their own housing, we have transitional housing, which provides an opportunity for young people to be housed without the burden of rent or utilities. This creates a great environment for them to establish employment, savings, and to work on their budgets. Case managers are present at the units, or the apartments, which are 4-bedroom apartments, throughout the week, while youth practice activities of daily living such as laundry, food shopping, cooking, cleaning, and connection to behavioral health and mental health services. Weekly individual meetings lay the foundation of stability through obtaining vital documentation, connection to healthcare, mental health providers, substance use treatment, and education. Operational since April, our female transitional housing unit has helped support 6 youth. It's a 4-bedroom apartment with 1 opening that should be filled by the end of this month. Our male transitional housing unit has been identified and has been staged and will be debuting in early October with an additional 4 beds available. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank some people who are here with us today. Our young adults have experienced barriers that have maintained their homeless status or housing instability for a long time. Our youth have been fortunate enough to have housing providers who have made the choice not to be a barrier, but also an asset to the community. As a service provider dedicated to housing these people, I would not be able to do my job without the collaborative efforts of property owners and property managers who provide safe and affordable housing and who also share our vision to make this housing attainable for young adults. We have the pleasure to be joined here tonight by a few of these folks, and would you please welcome me or join me in thanking them for their efforts. To wrap up this housing section, I would like to take this time to introduce another WooClap question. What part of the Milieu program are our young people most excited about having access to? Showers, case managers, laundry, or healthy food? Two, one. The answer is laundry. It's interesting because laundry is one of those things that you don't really think about every day, but it makes things much easier, such as going out, feeling better about yourself, going to a job interview, and just maintaining that self-care that we really talk about all the time. They find that their active efforts to better themselves, our youth that is, and having access to clean clothing has the ability to change someone's outlook and preparedness for the day. Thank you for your participation.
I think we learned three things from our young people that I wanted to speak to briefly. The first should be obvious, I think, to all of us, yet it seldom is. And that's it. If we want to understand the lives of our young people, if we want to understand how to best support our young people, then it's easiest and should be obvious to ask our young people. Yes. Sometimes we think that our children are merely children, regardless of how old they are, regardless of the experiences they've lived, and sometimes by us using terminology such as children too often, we assume that we need to make decisions for them instead of with them. We're trying to, in our public schools, to make sure that we resist that temptation, that we talk to our kids, that we understand our children. Because if we don't talk to our kids, then far too often we make what I've heard our children were experiencing, and that's assumptions about them. Now, I'm not that old, but I believe we stopped saying, when you assume, you do two things, right? But it still is very true. It's still very true. I don't know, Karen, if that was you that put together the trivia part of the program?
That table over there.
All right, right here. And they were pretty wise with putting together that trivia presentation, because if everybody started to follow the through line, the trivia wasn't only to teach what is true, it was also to teach that your assumptions are truly assumptions and that you don't truly know unless you ask the question. So I want to thank you for putting together that presentation, and well, you're getting claps from the youth group. So was it the youth group that helped with the presentation? All right. Because I think each time that you saw one of those questions come up, I don't think we ever saw that there was a 100% response to any one of the answers. But I would say that all of us, as we were responding, we thought we knew. Even the question about what was the cat's name. Everybody thought they knew. I didn't know, but I was pretty sure it wasn't Fuzzy Legs. Yeah. But with each of those questions, the answers that our young people were providing about the true barriers they were experiencing weren't necessarily the barriers that we assumed needed to be resolved. I can tell you, I've been working with young people for a long time. watching that presentation, I would not have thought that laundry was the way that we can best support. But I will tell you, I moved into a new house. I've been without laundry services for 2 weeks, and after I saw that answer, I said, that's quite obvious. It's quite obvious. I should have thought of that. I didn't think of it until y'all told me. So asking our young people, talking to our young people. In a minute, you're going to have a chance to hear from our great city manager who's doing a lot to support homelessness throughout the city. And when I first became superintendent, I had a couple of people that asked the question. They said, your office is downtown. What are you going to do about the homeless people that are out in front of the office? And the answer to me was quite obvious, but it really took people back. I said, I'm going to say good morning. I'm going to say, how are you doing today? How can I support you today? As I would anyone else, because of a challenge that an individual is experiencing does not define that individual. It doesn't define an adult any more than it defines our children, our young people, our young adults. But what it does is it provides you strength. And I will tell you this, if you find your way out of the odds that you're facing right now, out of those challenges you're experiencing right now, you've got an advantage on everyone who hasn't experienced those challenges throughout their life. When you overcome a challenge, it builds strength. Some of you know in the previous district where I served as superintendent, like most of our school districts around the country, there's constrained resources. I found in that district that I had to appoint myself to serve simultaneously as the principal of an alternative high school, serving youngsters ages 16 to 22. Primarily, we were serving youngsters who were experiencing homelessness. One youngster I had an opportunity to work closely with as superintendent, as principal. He often was experiencing challenges of getting to school, staying in school, and my approach there was to give him a call, to pick him up, to have him spend some time with me so I could best understand how to support him. We developed a bit of a relationship through that, and my message to him was always the same. Make it through today, and you're going to be stronger as a result. Reach out to the people who are here to help you. There are a lot of people who want to give, who want to support, but you got to raise your hand and let them know that you need help, and there's nothing more important, and there's nothing stronger than saying you need help when you need help. And you can look around this room, and this is just a small section of this community who's looking to provide support. Now, this young person graduated from high school, went on, and I just got a phone call from one of my previous school board members, and guess who's now running the field operations for his campaign for re-election? The young person who was graduating from high school, who now has become an advocate for youth who are experiencing homelessness, and now our great school board member in Santa Fe reached out to him for support on some field operations on the ground because, like I said, the challenges you're experiencing become strengths. He learned by reaching out to many people within the community to get support, by reaching out and helping and providing support, that now he built an entire network that's now quite valuable to people who are running campaigns, right? Well, something else that we heard from our young people here that we seldom really work to leverage and to make practical use of the great insight. And what they spoke to were the number of partners that they're trying to access within the community to get the support they need on any given day. Trying to find their way through who those people are that can be trusted. What are those resources that are fire and not trash? What are those resources? I'm gonna use that, man. That's the gift. It's the gift that keeps on giving, man. Who are those agencies? What are those agencies? Where are they located? And many of the conversations I've been having is that we need to do a better job as a community to bring together the many great, or the extraordinary great work, and the many agencies that are doing that work that are here in this room and that aren't within this room. How do we bring them together in a way that our children can access them in an easy defined, trustworthy, confidential if needed, and share out if needed environment? Community Teamwork's doing an excellent job of that, and I want to thank you, Karen, for bringing us together in this forum. Karen's been a great partner to me, and just learning of the multitude of services that are here. I'm really excited about the fact that I've been 2 months in the job, and I'm looking around the room and the many friends that I now see around the room as opposed to strangers. And in our public schools, we're going to be working to figure out how, as our public schools, do we become true hubs for our community. Because the greatest constraint we're facing in public education is not one of fiscal resources. There's a different resource that's constraining us each and every day, and that resource is time. We have our young people for 7 hours. 5 days a week, 180 days a year. As you heard from our panel, that's just a small snapshot of what they're experiencing. And in some cases, because of what they're experiencing outside of those hours, they're unable to access the resources during those hours. But what if our schools were community hubs, where at any time of day, you can access the resources you need? The community teamwork's doing a great job of bringing together those resources in some hubs that they've taken the initiative of creating. But what if we had those hubs in 28 different locations throughout the city of Lowell? What if every one of our schools were those types of hubs? A child may not be able to access during the day, but what if when they were able to access, the school was still there with the resources that they needed at the time that they needed? And then they could connect back to education when they were ready to connect back to education. Because what I heard from our young people here on this panel is not too different from what we should expect in this case. If you don't have a place to sleep, how can you expect someone to study? If you don't have something to eat, how can you expect someone to have a place in their mind where they can focus? There's a really powerful comic strip, if you haven't seen it. And it's a young person walking in the hallway, and he's carrying all of these bags, bundled up on his bags, on his back, and the bags say shelter, hunger, clothing, and the caption says, "Excuse me, can you help me with my luggage? I'm late to math class." Now, many of our youngsters are dealing with a different set of luggage than some of us in this room have experienced. In some cases, we've experienced that same luggage and we found a way to get beyond those odds, and now we're finding and trying to find a way to help other young people who have experienced it. Because I think one of the most powerful things I heard the youth group say, you're not alone, my friends. This entire room is here to support you. Many people within this room have experienced the same things that you're experiencing now. Some people in this room have experienced some of those things, and everybody here understands the strength and wisdom that's in all of you. So you are not alone. You will never be alone because you are part of Lowell, and that's a great asset within this world. I say that's a great asset within this world because I truly do believe that this is the greatest city in this country, and I believe that because of the rich diversity within this community. We are the second most diverse communities in the Commonwealth, 69 different languages spoken within our public schools. We heard a little bit from our youth group of the different experiences and different places they come from. I'm very excited about the fact that I'm looking out at this audience. It's full of people with different experiences who have come from different places, all coming to this city to give back, to be a part of this community. And we're working in our public schools to figure out how do we leverage that asset, the great diversity of experiences, diversity of backgrounds within this city to truly bring about a world-class education for all of our young people. So the last thing that I heard from the group is maybe more of a need than I heard it expressed within their responses. But the need for some real comprehensive strategic planning where we can understand what our young people want as goals, what our families want for their children, that we can then express in terms of outcomes for our educational system that allows us to knit together the fabric of this city to go to one path, one Lowell going forward. I've heard from our kids here today, the same that I've heard from kids throughout our schools, the same I've heard from families. We want happy, healthy, successful young people. I didn't hear from any of them today, no more than I heard from anyone in the past 2 months, that what we want is higher test scores. Haven't heard it. But I have heard that success is an outcome that our young people are working towards. I heard want to be a PhD in criminology. I heard we're going to be an entrepreneur and run not $1 million business, but a multi-million-dollar business. I heard we're going to be a a Marine. We're going to be an officer. And I also heard we want to be a great mother. What does happiness, what does healthiness, what does success mean in terms of those metrics that we can all follow, that we can line up around, and that we can target our resources after, so that we're accomplishing something in our public schools that's in line with what our community agencies are working towards, which are in line with what our young people want for themselves and what our parents want for their children. We're embarking on that strategic planning process as we speak. We're committed to delivering on that strategic plan come this spring, and I invite all of you in this room, particularly our young people, to be a voice in that effort, to make sure that we're working towards something that's meaningful for this community, because I think far too often we lose an important aspect of public schools, and that's the public. I'm here as your superintendent. I'm a servant of the public. Our schools exist within our community. Our schools are there because of the public, and we're working to make sure that we can build on the great work of that Karen has done with CTI, which has an extraordinary strategic plan I hear that they're working towards, the work and the leadership of Elieen, Donoghue, who you're going to hear from in a minute, about bringing the city together, and all of you that represent our multitude of community agencies. So thank you for all of that work. Our public schools are really very excited about the path forward, and I truly believe that Lowell is this country's greatest city, and our public schools are going to be a model for education across this country. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
past 9 months, CTI's Youth Services team has been working very closely with Middlesex Community College as well as UMass Lowell to identify housing insecure students. So part of that is really working on obviously identifying them, but then figuring out where they're at, what they need, and the services that can help integrate them into the community. So when it comes to housing, the three of us, so CTI as well as the college and university, receive funding to actually provide housing for 5 students, 5 full-time students. So 3 from UMass Lowell and 2 from Middlesex Community College to have housing year-round, which has been pretty amazing. And it's a pilot program, and we talked a little bit about it during our presentation. But the pilot program in itself is really just working. It's growing rapidly, and I'm assuming that it's going to be a non-pilot program and just a regularly functioning program soon, just because of the amazing response that we've received from the students as well as the faculty. So there's been a lot of effort and a lot of conversation around educational supports when it comes for housing and housing insecure students.
I'm very pleased to be here today, and I want to thank CTI and Karen Frederick for the great work they do. I was invited to come and talk about the work of the Homelessness and Sustainable Housing Taskforce that we formed earlier this year. But before I get into that, I do want to again thank Karen and CTI and the entire team for the impact you have had on our city, for the residents of our city, and the broad range of very high quality services and programming that CTI offers, supporting the needs of Lowell and the evolving population. So thank you for everything that you do. And I do want to thank CTI for identifying this really critical issue, and that is the pervasiveness of youth homelessness. This is something that many folks have overlooked, the housing instability that students have faced here in the city, and the meaningful action that CTI is taking in this area. The report that came out sometime last spring, I think, was an eye-opener for so many in the city. The number of youth who are either homeless or experiencing housing instability. That is truly a critical need. And when we talk about education, and it's been said here today, how do you push forward and get the education that you want, that you need, when you're worried every day about where you're going to live, where you're going to sleep that night, and where you're going to eat? It is almost insurmountable. And so to the panelists and those who shared their stories today, thank you for doing that, and you're a credit for everything that you have been able to achieve. Thank you so much. Early on in my time as the city manager here in the city of Lowell, which was about 1.5 years ago when I arrived, it became apparent that there was an urgent need to develop a plan as it pertains to homelessness here in the city. Now, this is something that is affecting cities and communities across this country. That's true. But when we look at the city of Lowell and we look at our homeless population, particularly single adult, youth, families, what are we doing about it? One thing that became very clear to us in the city is that the city can't do it alone. Much as we want to, much as we want to make sure that everybody has what they need here in the city of Lowell, it can't happen alone. And that's where others coming to the table to help made the task force work. Karen Frederick, as I mentioned, she's a superstar here today, if you haven't gotten that memo. But, calling on others to share their expertise, their resources, their dedication to the coalition of community leaders who came around the table to work on this issue. So Karen brought all of her expertise working in this area for many, many years, recognizing the need of homelessness and especially the adult single population. Also who came to the table is the head of the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, Jay Linehan. Jay, thank you. Now you might say, what does the Community Foundation and philanthropy have to do with it? Well, guess what? The Greater Lowell Community Foundation had been looking at and working on issues pertaining to homelessness in this city, and so it was a natural fit to come together and work together. And also the Lowell Plan came to the table, and they put forward resources and expertise, again, from another sector of our city, the business community. Because, you know, homelessness affects certainly the individuals first and foremost, but it affects the community, and we want to find out how we can work together. And so we were able to pull probably 30 leaders from across the city to come together around this very important issue. I want to let you know that the school department and the superintendent are part of this task force, and his folks. The Middlesex Community College is part of this task force, the University of Massachusetts Lowell, as well as the hospitals, the healthcare center, many of the folks working in the nonprofit world who are dealing with people with these needs. And so we were able to connect these people together, and we came up with a report after many, many meetings, and we had an expert that came who deals with this issue across the country. And some of the things we found out were pretty surprising. One thing we found out is we actually have resources in this community. We actually have people who are working in this area, but not necessarily working to get people into housing. We also have a need to communicate across the silos so that if this agency is working with someone and another agency as well, let's share the information and let's try and do the best job we can for everybody that we're here to serve. So some of the specific recommendations that the task force came up with, I'll share a couple of them with you. One was housing first model. What does that mean? Well, you know, over the years, there's been different models of how do we help people who are homeless? How do we get them into housing? Many people, especially the adult population, suffer from things like mental illness that isn't being treated or substance abuse issues that aren't being treated. And once upon a time, the thought was, well, if we can address those needs and get people the help they need or get the help with substance abuse, then we can try and put them into housing. And what we found out through the expertise and input, that doesn't work. It's hard to help someone in their needs when they don't have a sustainable housing, when they don't have a home to go to. And I would suggest for students, it's hard to figure out and work on your education when you don't know where you're going. So if someone says, go ahead, get your education, then we'll help you find a house, that's just not going to help. That just doesn't do the trick. And so this is a proven strategy in terms of housing first. This isn't something that was pulled out of thin air. There are data and statistics that support this. From 2010 to 2017, those communities who used housing first saw a 13% reduction in homelessness. And the model also calls for lowering barriers to try and get into housing. And so the task force recommends recommit to housing first. Let's find people housing, and then we'll deal with all their other issues and needs. Another recommendation was to collaborate and coordinate. And what that meant was looking at areas around homelessness, creating in the city for the first time a new position that is a homelessness coordinator. This position is critically important to the recommendations and the work that the task force has recommended. This person is going to carry forward all of those recommendations, working across barriers, not just in the city, but working with providers, working with developers, working with individuals, and with the folks who are working with the homelessness. And so we did post that position. The city council supported that. We posted it, and we will be in the process of hiring that person. A big step forward to changing the way we're dealing with homelessness here in the city. Another recommendation from the task force was, let's put together a crisis response system. So what does that mean? When there is a crisis, when someone finds themselves homeless, how do we respond? And so what we want to do is make sure we're responding by engaging all of the entities who deal with homelessness and make sure that we are coordinating and communicating, such as healthcare providers, for instance, who can access resources for individuals. Also, with our shelter, the Lowell Transitional Living Center, make specific changes there. Right now, the model calls for the shelter to only be open for people to stay in the evening. The recommendation was, let's go to a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week system, so that people who are there and homeless are not put into the street in the morning and have to wander the streets all day and come back in the evening for shelter. So that during the day they can access programs and help and assistance, and trying to get them, again, the focus into permanent and supportive housing. And that brings us to another topic that we recommended, and that was the permanent supportive housing. So the Housing First model we talked about. But in order to get people into permanent supportive housing, we need housing units for these individuals to live in. So it's all well and good to say, let's just have people go and live in a unit, in a permanent housing. But if they don't exist, what are we doing about that? And so as a community, with all of the partners at the table, we need to work together with our partners across all silos, creating permanent supportive housing here in the city of Lowell. So there will be a place that when the crisis response team kicks in, there is a place for them to house somebody on that day or within the next couple of days. See, what we don't want to happen is to have people permanently homeless. And unfortunately, our system right now is broken at the state and federal level. You know, there isn't support for shelters. There isn't the adequate support to do what needs to be doing. We need to be doing a better job so that we can get people into that permanent housing. And that means engaging the private sector, developers out there who have already contacted my office about these Taskforce recommendations, looking to see how can they be part of this process. So it's step by step, but these are important steps for the community to take. Another recommendation was what we called system integration and performance management. Well, that sounds like a mouthful of words, but what does it mean? It means all these agencies who are dealing with people who are homeless here in the city coordinate and communicate. Let's get a list of names, 1 through 100. Who's dealing with number 1? What are we doing for him or her? What does she need? What are the things that we can collectively or by cooperation get them so they can get into the housing that they need? And more importantly, stay there once they have the housing. And so in order to do this, we will implement training, a plan to train staff and volunteers who provide services to homeless adults and look toward evidence-based practices. So we will have some data that we can collect so we know what's happening with people and how we're doing. And then another component, and that has to do with the Transitional Living Center, Lowell's Transitional Living Center. As I mentioned, changing the model to a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week shelter, lowering the threshold for people to come in and get services, directing people to try and get them housing and have folks on board right there when they show up at the Transitional Living Center with a housing crisis, to assess them immediately as to where and what we could do for them. And then looking long-term for an exit strategy from shelter services to permanent housing. So we are very fortunate that the Lowell Transitional Living Center is also part of the leadership team working with us right step by step at the implementation in the work in this task force. So, we made the an announcement of the recommendations. As I said, the City Council fully supported recommendations recommendations, adopted them 100%, fully supported the creation of this new position, and I believe will fully support the needs as we move forward. You know, and again, I can't stress enough how important the work of CTI is in this effort. Without CTI, I would question how successful we could be. Addressing youth homelessness is also crucial in addressing chronically homeless adults. There is a connection, and so the more we can work with youth and solve their homelessness problems, the more successful not only they will be, but the less likely they would be homeless in the future. And so for a community like Lowell, this is a really, really important issue. You know, it's not good enough to say this is happening everywhere. That's not good enough, because there are communities in this country who have tackled this issue and have done a pretty good job of addressing what has been a crisis and has become epidemic. And so, knowing Lowell, and I want to echo the comments of my good friend, Dr. Boyd, who had said that Lowell is truly a unique city. Lowell is a city that can get this done. And I believe Lowell can take a bold step here and end homelessness as we know it. There'll always be people in crisis from time to time, and things happen in life. It's how we're dealing with them and what services we're going to offer and what kind of hope, because when all's said and done, hope matters to everybody who finds themselves there. So again, I just want to conclude my remarks by saying thank you to CTI for having this summit. Thank you to opening all of our eyes to the need out there. And thank you for being part of the collaboration and cooperation to come up with a solution. You know, sometimes it's easy to identify the problem. How do we fix it? And this is where CTI excels. So congratulations. Thank you for asking me to stop by. Thank you.
So now, this brings us to our next segment and our last segment. I invite Karen Frederick and Carl Howell back to the stage for the last part of our morning, the Youth Services Question and Answers.
Can you talk a little bit about the work on the milieu and what activities will be occurring there, you know, over on Dutton? Maybe I may have been out of the room earlier when you sort of referenced this, but I just think sort of saying a little bit more about that might be useful so everyone understands where we're going with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our milieu, again, 167 Dutton Street, we're opening up in fall, and that space is really going to be geared for young people to be able to access basic needs services. So in that space, there will be a full kitchen, as well as laundry and a shower, and direct connection to community supports and case management. So the idea of that space is really just to provide an area for young people to go, get their needs met, connect with us, and then kind of take the next steps needed in order towards either stability or whatever their goals might entail. It's not going to be a space that's going to be open 24 hours a day. It is going to be functioning during normal working hours, but it's going to be the hub of our services.
I just want to ask one question. I know I saw financial literacy in your many things within education. So just saying, that's one of the things we do for free. And wanted to ask if part of your initiatives ever involve credit building for your youth to help get them into the credit world. I'm not trying to encourage, we're not trying to encourage credit card use that's not managed well, but getting on the credit radar screen is something important in many people's development. I was just wondering what you guys are doing in that space.
So that's definitely one of the first and foremost conversations that we have with any of our participants that come in. We recognize that that's important not only to, you know, get housing, but, you know, just develop a future in general. So the work that we do is, you know, situational, depending on where young people are at. It could be from basic, you know, education. It could be connection to our financial literacy programs at CTI. And we just try to make sure that people understand kind of the magnitude of credit building and how that can kind of, you know, pave the rest of their life and their experiences. Would you guys add anything to that in regards to CTI services around credit building? Can I take this off? Sure. Oh, it comes off. Okay. So you can just I'm going to do that.
I think the main thing that we try to provide is individualized services that are specific to that individual. So I know in our financial literacy and education center, we do one-on-one coaching that's really based on the goals of that individual and trying to get them to where they need to go to build on their economic prosperity.
So what is your next vision, or what does it look like for all of us in this room who are supporting some part of your programs to elevate that? How can we coordinate and communicate better with you?
First, just want to echo our youth ambassadors. Your program is fire. So thank you very much for all your support. I also, just in response to that, I think Amanda kind of alluded to, there's a piece of paper on each table where we're looking to engage with everyone here and other community members to really provide outreach, to provide trainings, to collaborate. Our goal is to train and to try to provide a no wrong door, but really a youth-specific focus when people come in, so they get that specialized service. What we found and what research shows that there is young people, you deal with them a little bit more, you deal with them differently than you deal with maybe older populations, especially when it comes to homelessness. And, we found that even in our front door in our process that, we're not offering as a youth-friendly service and welcoming environment. And we want to really engage all the providers in this room to understand what that looks like, to train them so that youth feel like they're going to a safe space. You heard the youth ambassadors talk about, the 2 or 3 safe spaces they had. We really want that to be everyone in this area, everyone in this room to be that safe space that youth can go to and then be referred to other individuals and feel comfortable. I don't know if Amanda or Karen, you want to add to that?
So, yeah, just a couple of things. One is we have an advisory that's been helping to lead all of this initiative. And I know some of the folks are in this room. If you're on the advisory, would you stand up? I know I see Lucas back there, and I know Dan O'Connor was here. And that helps. And I think we need to grow and broaden that to make sure we have the perspective across agencies on the advisory. I think that's one thing. And really to create a system and then publicize it, right? So everyone knows the point of contact for getting services. And that's a challenge in every community. It's a challenge because our human service system is very siloed and fractured, and there's many pieces of it. But we need to create that system and then articulate it, right? And get it out so everyone knows where those points are. And I think it's even more imperative to do that because of the work we're doing across homelessness with the city, right? When an outreach person is out there, we don't want them to say, hi, how old are you, before they offer help, right? We want to make sure that if you see someone who's homeless and they're living on the street, the first question is, can I help you with housing, right? Not segmenting people into various categories as we are kind of sometimes forced to do by government. So we need to figure that out as a community together, how to make sure that everyone's aware of the points of entry and that it's easy and simple and well communicated.
I think that explained, that's great. That was great. I don't have anything else to add to that. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, hold on, sorry. Give me 1 second, Shami.
Hi, my name is Zoe Arthur. I am an owner of a small business. It's called Rosebud Staffing Agency here in Lowell. And I'm also president of the Africa America Alliance, to which CTI is our fiscal agent as a nonprofit. My question is, first of all, thank you for the summit, and thank you so much for providing yet another solution to one problem that is critical to our community. What I wanted to ask is there an age limit to what is considered youth? And then if so, what are the thoughts about transitioning to those folks that may have missed the age limit in and of itself?
So our current age limits, well, the ages that we provide services to for youth service specific is 16 to 24. Now, that is more, we have some young folks that come to us that are just about, they're just about to turn 25, and, we still want to provide that service. What we really try to do across the board, with no matter what person comes to us for our services or to connect with us, it's hard to connect in general, right? It's hard walking through someone's door and asking for help, or even just kind of showing your face. So we try to make sure that if someone's accessing us or they need our support in some way, that we're able to give them a warm handoff to some place or another service that is going to be more beneficial to them as they grow older or as they transition out of our services. So we try to make those community connections early on and try to see, gauge a timeline of what we can do, what's a feasible option, and the right resources to connect those people with, so that they're not left high and dry.
And Amanda's right, but let me just say this before I forget it, Michael, because I will forget. In my perfect world, and you're all welcome to join me in that world, it shouldn't matter. We should be able to, as Amanda said, do the right handoff to the right place, and it shouldn't be up to the person who's in need to figure that out. That's on us as providers, and I feel really strongly about that, because it's a challenging thing to navigate our systems. They are not easy. They're government regulated, which makes them even more complicated. So that's on us, in my opinion, to really, and that's what the city manager alluded to, working with outreach. We should all be doing it. We should all have the same message, and we should all know where people go to.
My question is, we have a lot of students from Lowell High who are in DCF and who have problem of homeless. Have you identified something which you have to do to go and talk to those kids? Because we all heard that most of them don't want to talk about it. They're struggling. They're embarrassed to talk about it. How are you going to work with Lowell High and other schools to identify these students before they get into this situation?
So I think we have a great opportunity with Dr. Boyd and with the new Chief Diversity and Outreach Officer that they've hired in the schools, Latifa. And I think from hearing what you said this morning, we need to train people. So if there's one person that is a safe, it doesn't have to be a guidance counselor, right? It could be a teacher, it could be the principal, that's what I heard. It can be anybody. But then we need all those anybodies to know what the next step is to connect you with us, right? And to connect those young people who are still struggling in school, who aren't saying anything with us. So I'm hoping that we will be talking about that as we move forward and figuring out how to do that training so that everybody knows. And I think once everybody knows, then information can get to us and we can more quickly help wrap our services. And that, I think, is one thing we can do.
Thank you. And so the other part of this too, earlier in the presentation, we were talking about some of the programs or some of the connections that we have with Lowell High. So we work very closely with Nancy Humphrey. Does Nancy want to wave? I see you over there. So she's the McKinney-Vento homeless liaison for Lowell Public Schools. And then we also are partnered with Youth Harbors, which is located within the high school. So now the interesting thing about that is, like Karen and Carl were saying, is that we need to be able to spread this information to our providers to be able to identify these young people, or our teachers, or the support system, or even the janitor, like anyone that might interact with these students on a daily basis. If people can recognize the signs that are associated with youth homelessness, or just signs that someone might be in crisis or having a difficult time, the more likely it is that they're going to be connected to resources faster. And so, having the connection with Nancy and then also with Youth Harbors, we're really trying to aim, especially like I said earlier, is that we want to be able to raise
awareness across the board, right? Not just for our young people, because our young people are being seen every single day by all of you, right? They are walking through our doors every single day, morning, noon, and night. And we want to make sure that we're there for them and we can provide them with the proper supports that they need.
I really appreciate you taking a chance and working with us. We work with a lot of property owners for family housing, for homeless families, in addition to young adults. And I know that it's, for a property owner, you think, are we going to take good care, or are there going to be pirates? What else? Imagine what else you can think of. And we'd like to know from you, and we're starting to outreach and work with landlords, property owners, about what might help them and incentivize people to become part of this initiative. Because we do need more housing. What's an average apartment in Lowell cost, Carl?
Like a two-bedroom.
Two-bedroom.
Around $1,400.
$1,400. I mean, it's impossible. And one of the data points we saw, and I probably will get these statistics wrong, but there's been a dramatic increase in the number of people in this city who are rent burdened, and that means they pay more than 30% of their income for rent. So they're paying 50 or 60 or 70, and those are people who came into community teamwork. Last year, 80% of the people who came in our doors for housing resources were rent burdened. So we know there's a problem out there. We know we're going to have to work with property owners. As the manager said, we're going to have to work with developers to help build more affordable housing. And a point of really good news I want to let people know is we had a meeting with HUD the other day around a different program, but we were talking to them about all of the work we do at Community Teamwork, and they have some additional vouchers for young people aging out of foster care. They're going to talk to us about maybe accessing. So to me, when you create momentum, and that's what we've created, momentum around solving this problem, people come to you with resources. And you've come to us with an apartment, and HUD is coming to us, hopefully with some vouchers. We're going to follow up on that. But that's the kind of thing we have to do. And any thoughts you have about things that would make it easier, we're willing to hear. And I think mentoring is a really good idea.
So the first and foremost thing that we focus on is building that relationship, right? And so we meet with these young folks, we figure out where they're at, and then we try to figure out how we can be helpful for them. That's never a situation in which young people are like, oh, well, what do I have to do? Tell me what I want to do, or tell me what's going to happen next for me. This is all very youth-focused and youth-driven, and we're just along for the ride. For the most part, when it comes to people that are being housed and through a rapid rehousing program or a transitional housing program, because we have that relationship and we have that engagement, and you can ask any of the people sitting at the table how many emails and text messages and phone calls and check-ins that we not require, but we make the effort to have, is that we focus on that. And I think that with that relationship and with that rapport, we're able to actually make sure young people are housed, and if there's difficulties, that we have that relationship with them to have those conversations, but then also have those conversations with the landlords and the housing providers. Because, like I said, we couldn't do our job without you guys. And it's important for, our young folks to be housed and to be happy and to be healthy. Any other questions? Jami?
Hello. Hi, I'm Jami, and your question and you guys' answer is probably part of my question. I fall right in the bracket. I'm 23 and I'm supporting myself, but one of the hardest things is to find a place. So you have to work 2 jobs to get a studio or something. I was just curious to see if there was any landlords actually that work with CTI right now here at the moment besides you. It was nice to see you speak. I am trying to find an apartment, so I was just wondering, it would be awesome, because if I see you, I could just pay. But not even just that. If there's a lot of condos being built right now, I just wish things were more affordable. Like, you know, you have to work like more than one job just to support yourself, and you got to do like the electricity bill, the gas, and then there's laundry. So like all that stuff really does add up. So to find somebody who's willing to go by your income, like that would be really great. But yeah, that was just what I had to say. Sorry.
Good job.
Thanks, yeah.
So that is a national problem, and right here in Lowell, we're in one of, the third highest housing market in Massachusetts, so it's a huge problem. And part of it, we need more housing developed that is affordable, you're exactly right, and we need more vouchers that help people pay 30% of their income, because that's really the guideline of what you should pay. So we are advocating with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for more mass rental vouchers, which is one thing. The federal vouchers, there haven't been any new ones for years and years and years, except for maybe these, hopefully, vouchers for foster, young people aging out of foster care.
I stand here before you as a foster kid, as a unaccompanied youth, as a homeless human being, and I stand here to tell you that I'm all right. I'm a mom, I work, I am doing amazing things, I'm a homeowner, and I do this work because, not necessarily because of all the wonderful things that happen along my way, but for every hugs, every positive word, every time you looked at me, every investment you've made that you don't think matters, those are the investments that matters. Every red tape that you've gone over, and every time you've done more than what you needed to do and should have done, like Amanda said, with the texts and the emails, those are the things we take with us. And those are the things we tell our kids about, we tell our friends about, and when there's nothing else to look forward to, there's always that one person we say, because they did it, because they saw us, because they remember us, we won't cut our wrist tonight. We won't smoke that pipe tonight. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.